mom and dad to see my need for time and love with the busy life they had. I felt some heartache through the years, but now I realize the past can be forgiven when I see them through your eyes. Loving eyes, loving eyes. Lord, let me see the ones I love through your loving eyes.
Everyone has their little discipline chart in front of them. This is session number 2 when it comes to the discipline portion. Obviously, it's our 7th session in reaching the heart of your teen. I just want to back up just a bit and talk to you about our presentation in our last session, especially when we focus in on the difference between what we said foolishness and teenishness. Now, if you had a younger child, we would have called it childishness. And as we opened up in our last session and trying to describe the difference and talk to you about the critical importance of knowing the difference, that childishness or teenishness is basically the mistakes that teens make. We make mistakes. They're not intentional. They don't come from our hearts. That we just sometimes make a mistake. Well, for young children, that's childishness. For teenagers, that's teenishness. What you want to look at and try to discern is the motive of the heart. Was there malice? Was there intent to deceive? Was there intent to disobey? If there was, then that's what is called foolishness. We talked about in our last session that teenishness needs to be corrected. We do that. We'll correct it in a number of different ways. In this session, we want to talk about foolishness and correcting it. It's the open defiance that has to be corrected even in the teen years. Some thoughts from you before we get started.
I just wanted to add to the issue of when you are kind of determining whether it's childishness or foolishness and the issues of the heart and what the intents of the heart are. We really need to be very careful because we realize we are in the process, in many cases, of rebuilding a relationship. And remember, the standard that we're going to judge our teen will be the same standard that the teen will judge us by. And if we're not at least being willing to attempt to give them the benefit of the doubt, in other words, if we're always judging their heart as having malicious intent or poor motives, then when we slip, that's going to be the same standard that they would judge us by. And you know the frustration that causes in your life when someone accuses you or tries to read the motive of your heart and you know that your intent was completely pure and innocent. So it's just a little warning for all of us.
Well, we put on the chart, just to catch you up to speed, the word correction. And then from correction, we talked about the teenishness, and that's on the chart for you, and foolishness. So foolishness is really going to become the core. How do we correct it? What are the guidelines? What should we look for as parents of teens? Again, Hun, who are we gearing this lesson to? Because we have to put this qualifier right up front.
Yes.
Because this isn't for everyone possibly sitting in the audience in this session.
That's true. If you remember the continuum that we've been talking about from going from here to here, and here they're practically out the door, this lesson probably is not going to be as helpful for the parents whose kids are ready to walk. Because obviously, if they're at that point in the relationship or lack of relationship and in rebellion, so what? You've got a consequence to my actions. So I would ask that you would prayerfully consider, though, even what the Lord could do in helping you, maybe just even to see more clearly of what you can do. But we realize that in some respects, for some of you, this is probably going to be a frustrating lesson, but we will deal with your inevitable question in regards to dealing with, well, what if they do walk, next week.
That's right. In our next session,
right,
we're going to talk about the teen that looks you eye to eye, face to face, goes toe to toe with you, and says, I simply don't care. I'm out of here. So what do we do with that? How do you handle that situation? That we'll pick up next time.
And again, we're here to encourage you, and if you remember the definition for encourage, that's to put courage into, to do the right thing. So we're trying to encourage not only parents, but also the teens. And Just recently, I read a quote from a teen, and it said, this is the teen speaking to the parent, and something for all of us, I think, to think about. It's hard to rebel, this is the teen speaking, when I know you're trying to understand me. And so as parents, this is something that we probably need to be thinking about.
And in the past, they may have always felt as parents, well, I've always tried to understand you. But you have to put a greater effort into how you communicate your willingness to listen. And maybe it means simply developing better listening skills. Maybe legitimately in your heart, you have tried to listen, but maybe your body language has communicated you're not listening, you're tuning out. You're already thinking of an answer before they finished asking their question. So something you may want to work on, right? Okay, let's talk about foolishness. Foolish behavior, ladies and gentlemen, needs correcting. But parents should not correct all foolish behavior the same way or with the same measure of consequence. Now, I would think that would be obvious, but not necessarily. Many times we see the teen cross the line, and we want to bring the full weight of the law down on them. And what we're saying to you is, no, that's not correct. Yes, if it was foolishness, if it was deceit, if it was trickery of the heart, if it was disobedience, if it was blatant, that's foolishness. We need to deal with it. But not all foolish behavior, not all foolish acts is going to receive the same amount of consequences. And for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, and on your chart, and it's really in the circle, there are 4 considerations we want you to think about. We want to walk through these 4 considerations. If your child, if your teenager does something that really falls into the foolish category, the intent to deceive, the disobedience, okay, let's look at these 4 considerations. Number 1, please, and there's a word you can fill in there. Number 1 in that circle under 4 considerations. Here's one of the first considerations. The punishment must equal the crime. The punishment must equal the crime. This is as basic to parenting and correcting behavior, whether it be true for a 3-year-old, a 13-year-old, or an 18-year-old. Punishment must fit the crime. Your son has a skateboard, and you've told him to be careful. But he comes home and he skateboards over the newly planted flowers, and you lose 2 of them. You don't say to him, you know, for those 2 flowers, I'm taking the skateboard away for 30 days, and you're going to be confined to your room with no privileges, just food and water. Well, that's a bit much for going over a couple of flowers in the rush to get home. You see, the problem we have in our society and in really the parenting generation that you make up is the fact that parents tend to either overpunish or underpunish. This is an example of overpunishing. The punishment does not fit the crime. On the other hand, maybe some of you have struggled with this, and it may even be one of the reasons why you're in this class is when the punishment does not fit the crime because the punishment is not sufficient. Your child, your teen, takes the skateboard and clobbers the neighbor's kid over the head and sends him to the hospital. And then you find out and you say, you know, son, for that, I'm taking away your Nintendo tonight. You put the neighbor's kid in the hospital and you're taking away the Nintendo because you want to show grace and mercy. Ladies and gentlemen, the punishment must fit the crime because every act of the heart has a value on it. And what in fact you are doing is you are really describing the value of their action by the punishment. If the teenager is banging the neighbor over the head with a skateboard, knocking them out cold, and you say, no Nintendo tonight for that, then the value of the neighbor's head and life is equal to 1 hour Nintendo. That's a problem. So the first consideration, you've got to find the balance, and you've got to be sensitive to this. Don't overpunish, don't underpunish. The punishment must fit the crime. Okay, that's the first consideration. It's foolish behavior. First thing I'm going to think about. I'm a parent of a teenager. The first thing I'm going to think about. Okay, what punishment is there that fits this crime?
I think it might be important too, not right at this moment, because we need to pay attention to what we're doing, but maybe later on this evening or just even in the next few days, is just reflect back of how you have treated this one particular area in the correction process all along in your child's life. Because see, patterns have been established once again, and so we've either in the process of correction either given them outs or overpunished, and either one is going to have some ramifications to it.
Right. Number 2, please. The key word is offense. So it's the commonness of the offense. The commonness of the offense, or frequency of the offense, but the commonness of the offense is another consideration. By that we mean this. Moms and dads, if you're going to make a judgment on your teen's behavior, then and a particular action, the question you have to ask is this a problem I'm facing every single day? Is it the same thing that's coming up over and over again? I mean, he is just leaving that skateboard out all the time. I've talked to him, and it's just every day we're dealing with this problem. What is the commonness of the offense? Maybe, well, he hasn't done this for 6 months. It's important that you assess how common is this problem. If it's rare, then I want to know that, because that's going to play into how I'm going to resolve, how I'm going to help correct, how I'm going to treat this foolish act.
And this is another area, too, where we need to be watching for the effort that's being made. Maybe it has been an area in their life that it's been a common offense. But now that you've established some common ground, you know areas that weaknesses that both of you have, that they are making an effort to change. And so when there's slip-ups, we need to be careful not to pounce on them immediately for that. And I guess I would offer that to the teen, too. If you see that your parents are really making an effort in a certain area, when they slip, give them the same grace.
Right. And you know, having teens make an assessment on parents, we can move to number 3 even with that, because they can look at their parents and in humility challenge them with this, as the parents can do with the teen. Number 3 is you want to look at the overall characterization of behavior. Key word there is behavior. Look at the overall characterization of behavior. Anne-Marie and I obviously deal a lot with young parents, working with even those who just had babies with our preparation for parenting program. And sometimes we will talk to a mom who, in her estimation, things aren't going well. So we said, well, tell us about it. How are things going? The baby's waking up happy? Oh, wakes up happy. Baby sleeping through the night? Oh, 10 hours at night. You're doing well on your routine, and your marriage is fine. Oh, and the siblings, everything's great. You're going to tell us, what is the problem? Well, the problem is this, and it just bothers me so much that, you know, she fusses almost 5 minutes when she goes down for a nap. And that is the problem that I'm having with this child. And our usual response is, do you know how many mothers in America and the world wish they had that problem? What is interesting is, instead of looking at the overall characterization of behavior, all of the successes, there's a focus on, but you know, you did this one time a year ago, and I remember. Or you did this again. I know you didn't do it, you haven't done it for a year, but you did it again. Parents of teens, nothing more frustrating, nothing more exasperating than preventing and not allowing your child to be human. Setting a standard and placing a yoke on them that's greater than the yoke and the standard that you'll live by. Looking at the overall characterization of behavior simply means this. In the whole scheme of life, in the scheme of responses to you, in the scheme of family identity and family unity and the standard that we're all striving for, when there's an overwhelming consensus in the behavior of the teen towards compliance, and one time, you want to remember this. When you make an assessment on that foolish act, look at the overall characterization of behavior, because if you're going to make a judgment, if you're going to bring consequences into that life of that teen, let's make sure it's fair, not just in the moment, but fair given the overall picture of everything going on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Number 4, Anne-Marie, consider the context of the moment. the context of the moment. What do we mean by this? We talked about context and how critical that is in parenting, that don't become a legalist, don't let the law be elevated above the principle. Context prevents us from being a legalist.
Well, one example that kind of comes to mind, let's just hypothetically say, you've been teaching all of your children to be respectful, and normally they are, and the context is that you're at a larger gathering, and many of the other teens have just gone ahead and stepped right to the front of the line because the food is out and they're ready to go, and your son or daughter joins right in with all of them. Well, yes, they've been taught we wait and defer and prefer others, but the context of this moment, given that it's not a real formal setting possibly, and they're all there.
A real loose potluck.
You wouldn't go up to him and say, "Don't you know? You're supposed to respect these people. What are you doing?" Don't make a big scene out of it. It's just one of those things.
It's not that you may not say something. It's just that the context is different. We don't want to necessarily lower the standard. We're not saying that. But we are saying, again, if there's a mistake, and even if it's foolishness, look into the context of the moment to see what other variables and other factors are playing into that particular behavior. Okay? So let's see what we have here so far. We have, there's foolishness, and when our child does something that we need to bring correction to their life, what we're simply saying is one should consider, make sure the punishment fits the crime, look at the frequency of this offense. Is this one something that's always going on? Look at the overall characterization of behavior in the context of the moment. Now, parents, once foolish behavior has been identified, and after you consider these four factors and four considerations, then the next thing you have to do is determine the appropriate level of the offense and applied consequences. You have to apply consequences accordingly. So not only do we have to have these four considerations, but this is true whether you have a 3-year-old or again whether you have a 15-year-old. Now we have to look at, all right, there are 3 levels of offenses. Where does this offense fit? We've already decided it is foolishness. It is black and white. It is wrong. So now where does it fit? Is it a level 1 offense? Is it a level 2 offense? Is it a level 3 offense? Now, since we know that offenses range from infrequent and minor infractions to open defiance, correction should reflect then the degree of the offense. And generally speaking, a child's foolishness is going to fall into one of these three levels of offenses. Before we move there, anything on that?
Yeah, before we do move to the 3 levels, I just want to remind everybody too, since we're, again, working with both parents and teens, those 4 considerations, it does work both ways. Each one of those things we need to be thinking about from the teen's perspective to the parents and from the parents to the teen.
Exactly. We have an action. It was foolish. Now, my job as a parent, in order to be fair, I must place it into one of these 3 levels. So let's talk about the 3 levels of offenses. Level number 1, and you'll see there in that box, it says level 1 in it. F2 should be the marking. 3 levels of offenses on that top box. Please write in the word admonishment, maybe / warning. Admonishment, warning. This is the first level of offense calls for an admonishment and warning. One more time. The first level of offense, in other words, this crime that they have committed, this error, this foolish act, it calls only for admonishment or warning. Now, Anne-Marie, admonishment, what does it mean? It's a biblical term.
Right, and it means to put into mind or also to caution against a specific fault, to warn, and the part that I really like of the definition, it's to inform or remind mildly. The mildly, I think, is critical for us to remember as parents. It's not with a loud voice that's coming out there accusative, but to bring them back into remembrance of what they know.
What type of offense would a teen do just to receive a warning? I mean, obviously it's light. A look, a word, what? Well,
again, you do the 4 considerations, and I think a really good example happened to us just last night.
Okay.
We have our niece is staying with us before she goes home after she's just finished up another year of college, and We were expecting her home, we didn't know exactly, but at a certain time last night, and it was getting later and later and later, and we hadn't heard from her, and we were getting concerned. And we thought about it, and we talked with her today. We figured there had to have been a good reason, and there was. And we said to her, because you are not characterized by this type of behavior, we realized that you were unable to get to a phone or something must have occurred. But again, we had to give her an admonishment and a warning that if this is going to, if you find yourself in this predicament again, just to give us a phone call, because obviously it's not even our child, so we're even more concerned about her, and it was getting kind of late.
So the point we want you to see is that, yeah, maybe there was a foolish act. Maybe in the rush of the evening and driving other kids around because others are getting down to the airport and they have to catch a plane and moving suitcases and everything. In that rush, you could have stopped and just called Uncle Gary and Aunt Anne Marie so that we wouldn't turn gray very quickly. But she didn't. She didn't do it with a deep, malicious intent. So we warned her. On behalf of her parents, we just admonished her. And the reason we did it is, again, like you said, honey, going back, is because this girl's not characterized by this. She's very characterized by calling. She's very characterized by being responsible. See, but this one time that she wasn't, well, you don't take the kid to the woodshed. No, it's a level one. I just want to admonish you. And an admonishment is not necessarily negative.
Right.
Again, we don't want you to think of it in the, well, I'm telling you, I'm warning you this time. It's not necessarily that. You know what it is? It's almost provoking one another to love and good works. Definitely provoking the good works. So that's the first level. But let's say that things become more serious. Level 2, please write in the word warning with action. Warning with action, or W/action. Level 2 is this. It needs more than just a verbal warning, verbal admonishment. But it doesn't need the full weight of the law. It's right in between. When I was a teenager, and if I left my bicycle in the front yard, my father would come home, roll a newspaper. He picked it up, coming in the door maybe. And it would be my dad who would just take the newspaper and just swat me in the backside and say, hey, son, your bicycle is out front. It doesn't belong there. It needs to be brought to the back of the house. Well, it was more than a warning. It was a newspaper swat. We use an illustration in Growing Kids God's Way, and I'll start with a younger child and work through the teens so you can see how this works, because this is so critical in building the relationship and preventing parents from becoming the delay response parent, the silent delayed parent. The silent delayed parent is the one who's silent as the child's getting himself in trouble. The parent watches it, and then the teen's in trouble, and then the parent jumps on the teen. Why didn't you say something before they crossed the line? If you saw them heading into trouble, why did you just sit back? Working with one of the illustrations, we talk about 3 children who wanted to play kickball in the backyard. One asked Mom, can we play? The mother said, you could play, but we just planted the garden. So when you kick the ball, make sure the 3 of you, when you play kickball, that you kick the ball away from the garden. So as they went out to play and she went in the house and she was doing some work and looking out the window, she saw little Becky, the youngest of the group. Every time she kicked the ball, she kicked it towards the garden. The only reason it did not go in the garden is because her older brother and sister were able to stop it. So Mom went out, called Becky over, and said, Becky, Mom is giving you instructions that I don't want that ball to be in that garden. And you're kicking the ball, and only because your brother and sister have stopped it. That's the only reason you're not in trouble. So I'm going to have you come right now. And I want you to sit in this chair. And I want you to sit here for 4 or 5 minutes. And I want you to think about your need to be more careful before you get yourself in trouble. Basically, what you're doing is this little child is learning how to gain self-control in the moment, to think through the issues before you cross the bridge of trouble. Same thing is true with teens. There are activities where this is what we call a reflective timeout. Proverbs 22:3 is the basis. Proverbs 22:3. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So the goal of the parent is to help the teen become prudent and to see evil before it happens, before it consumes them. You give your teenager a job. Look, son, it's a big patio. It needs to be swept. This is your job. And so the son's out there sweeping the patio, but you can see we're missing an awful lot. And you realize this needs to be cleaned, and if you don't do this, then you're just right the first time. You're going to have to come back and do it again. So you intervene, and you simply say, hey, I just want you to take a few minutes. Stop right now. Just stop. I want you to sit in the chair. Just sit in the chair. Number one, I want you to gain some self-control and think about what you're doing. You are leaving a lot of dirt all over the place. There's a lot of things not being swept up. You're going to have to come back and do it again. You're going to have to come back, and you're going to have to do it again, and it's going to be so much extra work, it's going to take more time. I want you to take 2 minutes, just think about it, so that you can start now and get the job done and get the job done right. That's a reflective timeout. It's more than just a warning. We're actually, and you're doing it before they cross the bridge of trouble, before they get themselves into full-blown evil. Stop them. And because they're in a rush, they want to get to play with their guys. No, we need to add more time here, but you just need it added. Hon, what else on this?
Well, I think by the time you get to the teen years too, you are definitely dealing with a lot more attitude than actions, but many times it's their wrong attitude that's going to lead them then to a wrong action, whereas little ones, they're not really doing a lot of thinking about their actions, they're just doing the wrong actions. But now they definitely are. And one, just even to carry this situation from last night, now the result of that was an apology and I'm sorry, but there is the possibility that as you are gently admonishing a teen regarding something, that their attitude begins to come into play, and you can see it. They know it's coming, but you also can see it in their face. You can hear it a little bit in the tone of their voice, and that would be another time when you would call them up short, say, you know what, I think you're losing control here, your attitude, your tone of voice, you might want to stop and think a few minutes before you say another word or do something.
How would a teenager, in the rebuilding process of the relationship, how would a teenager do that with their parents? Let's say it's the mom who's losing it now. How do you, without in any way usurping the privileges and the authority and God's intent that the parents are responsible for the children or the God-given governors of their life, how would a teen, though, do that? How does a teen come back to the parent and say, Mom, look at you, you're losing it?
Well, that's not a good attitude. It's going to have to be obviously with some respect and a proper attitude, and because we're hoping that by now you have agreed on these mutual issues that we're going to work on, that the teen could graciously say to his or her, to her parent, Mom, maybe we both need to stop before we continue this conversation. And just in a gracious way, and even teen, be real big about it. Say, I might end up losing control if we don't take a break here.
Yeah.
And
I think that one of the best ways to rebuke a parent is doing just that. I confess to you that there were times when during the teen years that when there was a disagreement or there was something I was calling the kids on the carpet for, and maybe I didn't get all the facts. Maybe my tone was wrong. Maybe I spoke before gathering the information that would have helped me understand exactly what was going on. And maybe I was, not maybe, in fact I was, at times I would frustrate them. They said to me, not in anger, but they said to me, and teens, I want you to get this because this is how you make ground with your parents. They said to me, Dad, I want to continue this conversation, but not now, because I'm very frustrated, and I'm going to say something that's going to get you upset, get me upset. I just need time by myself. You know what that said to me? That's what I should have been saying. That said to me, why didn't I say, I need to gain self-control? We need to stop. As your dad, I'm going to say something that I'll probably be sorry for. And yet, my children said that to me. My teenagers said that to me. And sure enough, in that 15 minutes, that half hour, things settled down so that I could hear from them, so that I did not exasperate them, but I could hear the complete story. We encourage you to give consideration to that. And parents, we encourage you to at least give your teens an opportunity to approach you, and when they approach you in humility, to consider listening to them. Even if they we need to call a timeout now. We need to pause now. Not to get out of it, and you'll know if they're trying to do that, but just that you're frustrating me. Fine, let's just pause, okay?
One other thing that might be appropriate for this level 2, because it's a warning with an action, and we do not recommend using Bible writing or reading or all of that as a punishment. But in this area, it might be appropriate, particularly if your teens are on this part of the continuum and not way over here, because over here they probably don't have a relationship with the Lord. But if they do profess to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and it might be appropriate to say, you know what, we've been working on this attitude. Why don't you take a few minutes and go to your room and look up some scripture in regards to this, or spend some time in prayer. So that could be an appropriate use during a reflective timeout of scripture. And I guess this might be a good place to kind of deal a little bit with the issue of salvation and teens. And it's difficult, particularly those of you that have raised your children in the church, that possibly your children at a young age made a profession of faith. But now you're dealing with behaviors that do not reflect biblical values at all. Some of them may be blatant enough and have said to you, I'm not a Christian. Parent, if they're saying that to you, take them at their word. Don't say, oh no, I remember when you were 5, you raised your hand and you asked Jesus into your heart. You know, that's probably the hardest thing for a parent of a teen that's been raising them in the church, to think that there's the possibility that here they are 16, 17, 18 years of age, and they really do not have a saving knowledge of what it,
they have a saving knowledge, they have no saving relationship.
Application and relationship in their life with Jesus Christ. And in one sense, it can be a relief to you, because, I mean, if you say, no, they're saved, but their actions aren't there, well, then that creates a conflict. You're thinking, no, these actions shouldn't be here. If you genuinely love Jesus and you have the Holy Spirit, we shouldn't be seeing this in your life. And it also can give you some compassion to think about, okay, what if I was dealing with a teenager that was not my child and an unbeliever? How would I respond to that teenager? That's right. So, you know, we all want our children to come to the Lord, but maybe it's not right now.
It's amazing how much more patient we can be with the neighbor's child who's not a believer than our own children who may or may not be a believer. Right. We need to have that same sense of patience. Well, I hope you teens sitting here can see just through this discipline chart how much we're putting your parents through. I mean, all the thinking they have to do. Listen, by the time they think this thing through, they're going to forget why they were going to punish you. But unfortunately, we are going to come to level 3. Level 3 is applied consequences. Applied consequences.
This concludes part 1 of session 7. Coming up next, join Gary and Anne-Marie as they continue with Reaching the Heart of Your Teen, wrapping up the correction side of discipline.
Level 3 is applied consequences. Applied consequences. What does that mean? Well, that means we've gone beyond a level 1. This isn't a warning. We've gone beyond a level 2. This isn't just simply we need to talk more. This is level 3. This was something I spoke to you earlier this morning about and asked you not to do, and you just turned around and you did it. We need to have now applied consequences. So what are the applied consequences? We're dealing with teenagers. Boy, don't you wish they were young again and you could start over? Because now there are many more variables in their life, and you have less disciplined tools to work with. So let's look at some of the discipline tools. That first box coming over, F5, write in the word natural. Because we're going to look at the types of consequences now, and I want to define them for you. The types of consequences. The first one is called natural consequences. And basically, a natural consequence is the result of a bad decision, a result of our foolishness. The natural pain that comes because I chose wrong. With young children, we use the illustration of a little boy running around on the sidewalk when mom was waiting for the bus. And mom said, don't run anymore, don't run anymore, obey mommy. And he disregarded mom, and he ran, and he fell down, and he scraped his knees, and they sting now, and they're all red. Well, the pain that came from falling down, that came from disobeying, that was the natural consequence. You don't say, well, you disobeyed and you hurt yourself, I got to spank you anyway. No. You teach into the moment realizing there was a natural consequence, and it was painful. So now teach into it. That's what a natural consequence is. Your son or daughter didn't come home for dinner, and the kitchen's closed. The pain in his tummy at 9 o'clock is the natural consequence for failing to become part and being responsible to come home when you're told to come home. That's the natural consequence. For some families, you may need to use, if there's not a natural pain, you may go to the next box below it, logical consequences. Now, logical consequence simply means, look, there's no natural pain, therefore, I want to find a consequence that's tied to the behavior. We may have used this, I think, in our last session, honey, again, using a similar analogy. Teenager, he has the privilege of going to a friend's house after school, but he's not getting his homework done. So in order to enjoy the privilege of being with your friends after school, you're going to have to maintain your homework. The logical consequence for not getting the homework done is you simply cannot go to your friend's house because that time is needed for you to do your homework. Let's say the homework's not being done and he's still going to his friend's house. The logical consequence would not be, well, you know what we're going to do? We're taking the stereo out of your bedroom. Or the logical consequence would be, you know, the family's going on vacation, but you're not going with us. The logical consequence is not saying, no television for a month. See, none of those have anything to do with the real issue. He needs more time. If he's going to spend time at his friend's house, he needs to be home. And if you want that privilege, then there's going to be a corresponding consequence if you cannot be responsible for everything that's required. And in some cases, including coming home on time. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The third is the loss of privileges. And by the way, just so you know, when we surveyed our teenagers, these are some more of the questions we're asking them. And when we asked them, what would be suitable punishments, suitable consequences? So you're not getting it just from our experience, but our survey of teenagers. This is, and again, we're dealing with teenagers at all points of this continuum. This is what seems to be coming up more and more, that they're saying what is legitimate. Loss of a privilege. What do we mean by a loss of a privilege? Again, I guess we could use that dinner analogy or supper analogy, but...
Right, or to be able to either go to a friend's house or to an activity. Many times the loss of a privilege might result in grounding, as it's called. Mm-hmm. And I guess this might be a good time to address that issue too. With grounding does not necessarily mean isolation, because you may have a teen that you say, okay, you're not going out for a week, you're not going to see your friends after school, you're not going to have any evening activities, and so they say fine, so they stay in their room. You're still not achieving the goal that you really want to as far as rebuilding a relationship with the teen. So it could be, the grounding means that they are going to participate in the evening family activities. Mm-hmm. Anything that the family may have planned together, they are going to participate in that.
We're going to your sister's soccer game, and you're coming. That's part of grounding. Grounding is not necessarily isolation. Grounding means we're removing the privilege of the freedom you had over here, and we're going to ground you. It's like a pilot. When he's grounded, that doesn't mean he just spends his time just in the hangar waiting for him to be ungrounded. It means that he goes on with his life, but he's not going to fly. It's the same thing with the teenager. You're going to get on with life, but you're going to get on with life with the family. So it's important that not only may you lose a privilege, some teens are 16, 17, they're driving, because they're not handling the car, not being home on time. Maybe it's the way that the car keeps coming back on empty. The logical consequence of the loss of privilege here would be you've lost the privilege of using the car because you're not responsible to put in your share of what you're using. Finally, we come to restitution. Restitution. This is another method of correction. Not only is it needed, but we're suggesting here that it's an applied consequence. When we talk about restitution, we're talking about not only money, you know, the mistake you made, the violation, you broke your sister's whatever fishbowl, you have to go out and buy her a new fishbowl. Yes, and so there's going to be restitution financially. Certainly you may need that. But there's more than financial, there's time restitution. Time restitution. Let's go back to our analogy. You're over your friend's house, but you've become characterized by not caring about the rest of the family. We start dinner at 6. We like to eat together as a family. You don't seem to come home to 6:05, 6:10, 6:15. Time restitution means this. You owe each family member 15 minutes. And of course, the family member may say, but I don't want to be with them 15 minutes. So, time restitution also means you'll be doing your sister's jobs, chores, for 15 minutes worth. That could be 3 days worth. Or you may be doing your brother's jobs, 15 minutes worth. That's also time restitution. Not only is it spending time with the family, but maybe it's picking up and doing some of their chores, doing some of their tasks. What else on that?
Well, I think that it's, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, for some this is like, okay, I can see that this is going to work, and for others, all right, so they're grounded or they have to do this restitution, but what about the attitude that's going to ensue in all of that? And so I think that we probably should address a little bit the issue of the natural consequences and the impact on the rest of the family. As a norm, we would say, don't, because you're having a consequence for the teen, don't have the whole rest of the family be penalized by it. For example, let's just hypothetically say you were all going to go out to get ice creams together as a family, and so the teenager does something that you're going to ground him or say, no, you cannot go, but yet you don't want to leave him home, so the whole family loses out on that. So be real careful as you're giving out some of these consequences that the other siblings, or even you as a mom and dad, don't have to suffer.
Some would say, though, but what we're going to do is we're going to take him, and he's going to be in the car, but he can't have ice cream. What you're doing then is you're flaunting at the child his sin. And that's not right either. You're simply saying, you're not as good as us, look at us, we're having ice cream. You want to be sensitive to that. So you want to be real careful when you give out your natural consequences and when you're looking at the attitude, right? Yeah. Okay, let's see what we have here. Parents, you're going to use instruction. That's the starting point. Most conflicts come because of our instruction. You're going to instruct your children and your teenagers when they're doing non-moral activities such as learning to ride a bike or learning to drive a car. And you're going to instruct your children in behavior, moral activities. And when you instruct them in moral behavior and give them their levels of expectations, there's going to be times when they're just not going to make it. Sometimes their error and their mistake is just plain teenishness. They didn't mean to make a mistake, they just make it. Sometimes it is foolishness. It is open defiance. Well, there's going to be a consequence for childishness, but because the motive of the heart, there's no malice. It wasn't intentional. The consequences are completely different. But when there is malice, when it is disobedience, when there is intent to deceive or intent to disturb, intent to disobey, and it's very, very clear, that's called foolishness. That's what the Bible calls it. That foolishness needs to be dealt with. But before you deal with that foolishness, let's make sure that we look at the entire picture. I want to look at the context of the moment in which the foolishness took place. I want to look at the commonness of the offense. I want to look at the teen's overall characterization of behavior before I pass judgment. And when I do pass judgment, I want to make sure that in fact the punishment fits the crime. I'm going to consider three things. I'm going to consider, is this just a warning? Because this is a new behavior, or this is a behavior that was taken care of a long time ago, but it's beginning to resurface. Just a warning. Is this a behavior, a foolish act that needs more than a warning but not the full weight of justice? Is it a behavior that simply needs a newspaper swat on the back? Or maybe, hey, let's just take a few moments and sit down and think about what you're doing before you get yourself into deeper trouble? Or is this a behavior that, look, this is open defiance, we need to deal with this. You chose foolishly, you acted foolishly, and mom and dad need to bring correction to life. May I point out, not to get even? May I point out, it's not to be vindictive, because God does not get even. He is not vindictive in punishment. There's only one reason for punishment. There's only one reason for this type of correction. It's to help the child, the teen, change an attitude in the heart that is driving his behavior. That's why. That's why there's tests and trials, is to change the heart, to bring the heart under control through the parent's influence, so that there will come a day when the teenager is self-legislating according to the moral precepts that the family lives by, and hopefully that is the Word of God. So you're going to have these applied consequences. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to use a natural consequence if you can. You're going to use some type of logical consequence. Maybe it's a loss of privilege. Maybe it's a type of restitution. Spanking. If you've never spanked your teenager, don't. Spanking's for young children. Does that mean that we'll never spank again once they hit 13? No, you guys are not out of the woods yet. There's what we consider 1% left over to remind you who's in charge. But I will say this. It will be a very, very rare day that you would use biblical chastisement. We're not saying never use it. We're just saying it would be a very rare day. And I will point out that parents who tell us that they spank their teenagers, those who understand all of the concepts, their usual response from the teenager is this: thank you. I needed that. Because there was something of sin built up in the heart that they couldn't get rid of, and they needed something as drastic as actually a paddling to do it. The normative is you wouldn't, because you are to work through by way of influencing them. You're going to exercise your direction by influence, not by your authority. You're building this relationship, but there's a line, and if they cross it, you deal with it, and continue to deal with it. Some final thoughts before we take maybe some questions.
Well, just a thought that was shared with me one time by a teen whose parents were making a lot of changes in their life, and they said what was really helpful, and in talking with their peers, was the fact that their parents realized that this was difficult on the teen, because you all just didn't get here overnight. There were patterns that have been established both in the parent's life and in the teen's life, and many times for the teen, they are patterns that we have allowed to continue. Just to give an illustration from a younger child, we get asked the question regarding thumb sucking, particularly for a child now that's 4 years of age. Well, who has allowed the child to suck their thumb until they were 4? The parent. So you're not going to be able to break that habit overnight. And it's the same thing now with the teenager, with some of the things that you're seeing. Who has allowed the teen not to suffer from consequences up to this point? And so now there's some drastic changes that are going to be made in the house. And it's important as parents that we acknowledge that to the teenager, that you realize that this is going to be hard, and I am sorry, but I'm not going to continue in wrong patterns. We all need to make some changes.
And I think, too, the teens have to acknowledge and come to a point of realizing no one is forcing you to cross the line. You teens are doing it on your own. What you have in your favor is knowing where the line is now. Some of you may never have known where the line was. But now you know where the line is. Now you know what the consequences in many of these cases are going to be. But your parents didn't take your arm and twist it behind your back and say, here, please sin. make my life miserable. No, you choose that. It's like a child. You choose wrong. You have to understand when you choose wrong, just like your parents have to understand, even in adulthood, when they choose wrong. Simultaneously, you are choosing consequences. When you choose wrong, simultaneously, you are choosing consequences. You need to understand that, not just to get through the teen years. You need to understand that to get through life. That's why God wants us to choose right and choose right.
Because there's also consequences to choosing right. There are blessings, and then there are cursings from wrong.
That's good. We have one more session with you. When there's so many wrap-up topics and issues dealing with teens that we have to deal with. I know I'm just dealing with, what about the teen that says, I'm not doing this. Goodbye. Hey, how about dating? Got some questions on dating? Is there such a thing? Just what about some of those little trouble spots? We're going to cover a lot in the next session. We'll do that. Right now, let's come down and talk to you more about the wrap-up on this, reaching the heart of your teen in this discipline chart, dealing with their foolishness. Some questions, just get your hands up, and men will be coming around with the microphones.
I have a question. I have a 14-year-old son, and at times during church, he'll sit there and he'll be kicking the chair in front of him. I'll go, stop. He'll do it again. Stop, Sean. Do it again. He continues. What do? You I've taken him out of church to correct him, go back, and he does it again. And it's like he's at an age to where it's like, I don't want, to spank him. And I'm not good with consequences. What do you give for a consequence in a situation like that?
Is this someone you know right here?
Oh, yes.
Well, first of all, let me ask Sean a question. Sean, are you used to having mom repeat herself 2-3 times?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, can you tell me, do you know, Sean, can you figure out when she really means it? I mean, is there like she really starts getting upset, or you can see it on her face when this is it? I mean, I better not cross this line.
I see it on her face mainly. She gets really mad, and I can almost see fear in her eyes.
Yeah,
not fear, but
she doesn't
rage.
look like your mother anymore.
No.
Yeah, smoke's coming out of her nostrils. You know. Yeah. Well, you know what that's called, Sean? Now, I want to know if you'll help your mom with this, because this isn't a problem for teens or preteens or children. This issue of coming to compliance the first time your mom asks you, I know it's not a problem for you. You figured it out. But what you have to say is, Mom, I want to encourage you. Now, when you give me instructions, Mom, don't repeat them. Now, if you know, Mom, the rule Mr. Ezzo said, never give an instruction unless you mean to see it through, unless you really mean it. Now, Mom, I'm your son, and I love you, and I want to help you. So the way I want to help you is I want to encourage you. Now, if I do something wrong, Mom, just don't say it again. Just deal with me. And if you deal with me on a regular basis at home, and you deal with me the first time, Mom, I won't be kicking those chairs anymore. Because I'm also going to learn why kicking a chair in church is just troublesome to the person. You've got to make a covenant with me, Sean, that you're going to help your mom. Now you're going to help your mom. You know what? You're going to help a lot of moms and a lot of dads, because it's so much easier for us to repeat ourselves. And you know what that happens? When I repeat myself, Sean, more than not, I am training you and telling you I really don't mean it. And I think you know that. That's why you could figure out your mom when she gets, you know when she's, it's like, I know when Mrs. Ezzo, I know when she finally gets upset with me. See, we know that. We just know that. But a consequence has to come, because you have to take responsibility for doing right. But at the same time, you have to help your mother take responsibility for helping you to do right the first time. Okay? Okay, it's a deal. I want to report next week.
So what consequence do you do?
Well, actually, in this particular situation, you're asking about an isolated situation in church.
Well, no, it's happened even here this evening.
Well, okay. Well, this is church. This is church. The problem is not here at church. You deal with it at home. Because the reason why he will continue to do what you've asked him not to do is because he doesn't have confidence in that you are going to follow through. So how are you going to follow through? That's the thing. I bet you there's a lot of things that he has going on in his life that he would not want disturbed by Mom.
Right.
So you just have to be consistent and make sure that he understands that you do mean it. And Sean, your responsibility is to make sure, Mom, you've got to mean it, because I'm just going to grow up to be terribly wayward if you don't follow through. Just scare her. Okay.
One, not just even for Sean, but for many youngsters, still at this teen age, and I don't know if maybe it's more a male thing than female, but they do have energy, and they do kick chairs, and they do keep their legs moving or their arms moving or something. And if this is a problem, it's probably been a problem all the way along, and so somewhere along the line we need to start to get some self-control. And you might even want to practice, as silly as it might seem, but even practice at home, having a period of time where you just sit still. And even as a teenager, even as an adult sometimes, it's a good challenge and an exercise in self-control in our own life to see, okay, who's going to master the kicking of this leg or me? And put a timer on and say, okay, for 2 minutes I'm going to sit here completely still, and amaze yourself, and then build the time up, because we all know grown people that still kick the chairs, and the practical reason why in an environment like this is obviously you're not thinking about the people that are around you, because it's disturbing to them. So.
Okay. Let's take this question here.
I'm here to repent, first of all, because I'm one of those nervous people. I had a question on logical consequences.
Okay.
Going back to the example with Johnny, he goes to his friends after school each day, and then finally you realize he's not doing his homework. So you give him the logical consequence, and he begins to do it. Is there a certain time or a certain attitude that we should look for when we begin to trust Johnny again, and then give him the opportunity to begin doing as he's told to?
Johnny determines the time by demonstrating it through the consistency of his homework being done. Once you begin to see the consistency, you got to remember, it was the inconsistency of the homework that brought on the consequence, so it has to be the consistency of the homework that will set him free again. But you never set him free again without instructions, admonishment, warning, and teaching. And that teaching is, now, let us learn a lesson for life. And you're going to teach into, if you're going to accept this area of privilege, wherever there's a privilege, there's a responsibility. You must maintain this average, or you must maintain the completion of your homework. If you do not, then the consequence must be extended even longer next time, because you have tested it, you have set him free again to retry it, you found that he did not accept the responsibility. Well, next time it's going to be even worse. But always teach. Listen, parents, don't just teach for the moment, teach for life. Everything you're giving your teens, teach for life. I remember my father doing that. He didn't just teach me for the moment. He always told me, in life this will happen. In life, teach for the future. Teach for the future. So it's not just today getting your homework done. Let me teach you the lesson, tell you about what's going to happen in life. In life. Okay. It's right here. We have a question.
What consequence do you have for your child if it's an area with the mouth, such as disrespect? I mean, you don't take a Nintendo away necessarily.
Right.
We've done all kinds of things like that, and sometimes it doesn't matter. So what consequence for the mouth?
What would be the logical consequence for the mouth? Okay.
Right.
We'll answer that. Go ahead. You know what? Sometimes, honey, I think it's just sitting down. I think this is where the be still and know I am God, it's almost be still and know I'm your dad. Your tongue gets you into more trouble than your actions. We must get self-control right now. This is what we call, this is where the illustration I used earlier with my daughters, they would say, I need to stop. We need to stop because I know my tongue's going to run away with me. If your son doesn't have that power, that ability to stop, then you must have it. You must call, wait a minute, right now. Oh, stop. You've got to go there, and I've got to go there, and we both got to sit in our room. We've got to wait. Because you know the way you're responding to me, I can't respond back to you. I wouldn't get into a shouting match. But you're going to have to allow time now to at least provide the room and the opportunity for both of you to get self-control or just for him to get self-control. And then you need to come right back at it. But you yourself, the Bible's clear. A soft answer turns away wrath. And we know, I know, children, they can provoke us and they can get us going. And you know, somehow they know every single little button to push. Yeah, right? We need to gain self-control too, because this is a partnership that we're talking about and restoring. What would you add to that?
Well, not a soft answer definitely does turn away wrath, and sometimes it is a matter of, obviously, now you've got to be upfront, which you've probably said it a number of times, but never sufficiently followed through. I am just not going to entertain it, because I can potentially see either a son or a daughter. You may choose to walk away, and they're just right after you, continuing going at it. And our natural inclination is finally just to turn around and to give it back to them. And so you just have to be determined. You know, if you're both at home, just go say, tell me not to say anything, tell me not to say anything, because then you have to know. You know, this is a child that obviously from the time he or she was just a little one was probably the one that said, oh, well, I know, or the corrected situations, right. You know, had a lot of verbal freedoms, and so now this is the ramification.
Let me also remind you that if you're getting into a shouting match, consider that only a red flag. That's right. We don't fix it then. The natural propensity in every one of us is we want to fix it now, and we want to fix it forever. As we shared with you, fix it in moments of non-conflict. 3 days from now, we're going to come and we're going to revisit this shouting match. Not now. We'll deal with it, and we'll deal the best we can and put the Band-Aid on, but you know where you're going to fix it, or at least you're going to be in the process of fixing it? It's when you drive off to McDonald's and he gets a Big Mac and a fry, and you get yourself a Coke and one, and you sit down and say, let's talk. You know what I want to talk about? I'm not upset. I just want to talk to you about last Monday. You remember Monday when we were doing the shouting back and forth? I want to talk to you about that. Why? Because now, there's no reason for me to be defensive. Now, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not in trouble. Now, I could hear what you're saying. Now, I could hear your heart, Dad. It's in the middle of conflict. I can't hear your heart. I only hear your tongue. That's why most successful moral training takes place in moments of non-conflict rather than in the moments of conflict. Yes, you want to suppress evil, but you got to remember you have to come alongside and elevate the good in periods of non-conflict. Okay.
I'm looking at this flow chart here, and I think it's great. It's very practical, like you said. It applies just as well in life as it does with your children. And I can't see a couple or parents, single parent or anybody, being able to do this unless they can do this at the level, for example, one with the other, husband and wife, or stepfathers, or what have you. I see that a person has to realize that you have to apply this at other levels in order for you to be successful with your children.
Well, that's true. I mean, what we're here for is not to change the hearts of your teens, although that's the title of it, but really change the hearts of the parents. There's an entire thinking process that has to go on, that everything we've shared up to this point, the bulk of it, I should say, is really directed to parents changing, not teens. We really believe when we get parents to change, there's a corresponding change in the teen. They have a greater freedom, a sense that they will follow. Would you?
Oh, I definitely would concur. And it's always encouraging for us when we realize the parents come to that point of realization, because then you're halfway there.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? You have to go home and you have to now think through those 4 general principles. Then you have to think the 3 levels of consequences. And you think, I've never heard this before. And I'll tell you, by next week, it should be like this in your mind. You should know right off. It should be second nature. Oh, yeah, I need to remember this. I'm looking at this, 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 here. I'm going to render a judgment. Until you're willing to have that sense of urgency. I'll put it this way. The change in your family is only going to come proportionate to the speed in which you sense urgency to change. That's enough for tonight. God bless you. Thank you.
When I was a young girl, it was hard for Mom and Dad to see my need for time and love with the busy life they had. I felt some heartache through the years, but now I realize the past can be forgiven when I see them through your eyes. Loving let me see the ones I love through your loving eyes.
In tonight's session, this is the 8th session of Reaching the Heart of Your Teen. We're going to be dealing with a number of common topics that really is associated with raising teenagers. We're going to be talking about dress and peers and dating and the length of hair or the type of jewelry, the type of clothes. We're going to talk about many of the issues that are right at home where you're at. But where we want to start is really at the real extreme of the continuum. You'll remember when we first started, and we've used this analogy throughout our teaching, that we have a continuum. And we have parents who have some light difficulties up here, and they're trying to work to resolve them. And there's some in this audience, and will always be in our audiences, those who are really struggling with their teens. There's a greater sense of problem. There's a greater severity of problems. And you're grappling with those problems. We want to start at this end of the continuum. And to help us do that, we have asked our very special friend, Ed Walsh, Detective Ed Walsh, to join us. Ed, thank you for coming. On our outlines, on your outlines, we're going to be starting right in on Roman numeral 2, juvenile emancipation. My, what a title that is, juvenile emancipation. Folks, some of you have honestly worked on trying to restore the relationship with your teen. That's why you're in this class. You've followed some of the principles, if not all of them. You've gone back. You've tried to become more vulnerable. You tried to search your own heart, having God search it. You have been honest. You've sought forgiveness. And maybe you're at a point, and maybe it happened before you got into the class, that your teen has said, hey, listen, I'm out of here. I don't want to be part of this family. I want to do what I want to do. And I don't want you telling me. I don't want you telling me about your religion. And I don't want you to be telling me about your God. And I'm going to do what I want to do. And don't put any limitations, because I'm out the door. And I'll call you. Don't call me. Well, maybe you're in that situation. Or maybe you have a teenager that's heading in that direction. What we've asked Ed to do is to come and share his experience, because he's very much involved not only in the Growing Families International Ministry, but as a detective working with social services, in and out of juvenile court, working with many minors who are struggling with their relationship with their parents. We've asked our friend, Detective Ed Walsh, to come in and just explain some of the legal ramifications that's involved when a teenager, and I want you teens to hear this, that's involved with a teenager says, I'm out of here. You can't do anything to me. So before I go any further, first of all, welcome, Ed, and thanks for joining us in this class.
It's a pleasure to be here, Gary. I have to say that your ministry has meant so much to both my wife and I, but I know that a lot of the people that live in the community where I do are being impacted by this program, and we're seeing real changes of hearts and lives, not only in our local church, but in churches all around the county and where I live. And I'm just really thrilled and honored to be a part of that.
Well, we appreciate your participation. You know, Adam, I used to believe, before I did the research on this, I thought that the teens held all the trump cards. I thought that if a teen said, and we've heard this, we have parents who come into our office for counseling. I thought if a teen said, I'm out of here and I'm calling social services and there's nothing you can do, I could report you, or I'm going to call juvenile hall, or I'm going to call the police and they'll set me free. You know, I can do what I want to do and you can't tell me. And after doing my research, I come to find out that's not true, is it?
No,
not
it's
at
not.
all. Well, let's try to bring some clarity to this issue. If a teen is at a point where they're struggling with their parents and they want out of the house, so what does the legal system say? What must the teen prove, first of all?
Well, the first part of it is that the parents are responsible for the raising and the rearing of their children. The law is very clear that the parents have that responsibility. But a lot of times parents run into frustration and problems because kids aren't going along with that program. And oftentimes the kids in that case think they're holding all the trump cards and they can basically dictate the rules of the home, but that's not necessarily true. Just as the child says that, hey, I can call social services on you and get you in all kinds of trouble, well, the parents can also call social services on the kids and say, hey, this kid is incorrigible. He's not going by the rules of my home. I cannot maintain discipline within the home. He doesn't do what I say or ask. And I cannot be held accountable for the things that my son or daughter is doing when they're not listening to me. And at that point, they can have the minor declared a ward of the court.
Which doesn't mean they do anything they want to do.
No, the child is taken into protective custody with a social services directive and is taken to foster care. Or right into the juvenile holding facility, which is non-custodial. It's custodial, but it's not like an arrest situation.
This is pretty broad-based throughout the country. I mean, we're in Southern California doing this now, but I think as future audiences are joining us, this is pretty standard, though, across the nation. Laws
vary from state to state, and some are stricter than others, and some are more lenient than others, but California, I know, has always ventured to be more on the lenient side than it is the strict side, and there are some states where it's even more defined.
Yeah. If a teenager went into protective custody or foster care, that's not a pleasant thing.
Oh, not necessarily.
I mean, it's not like you're dealing with a 3-year-old in foster care where there's a greater amount of love and grace shown, but now when you're dealing with teenagers, it's sort of like, hey, I'll tell you when you get up, and we're going to tell you when you go to bed, and we're going to tell you when you get to eat, and we may even tell you when you're going to the bathroom.
Well, a lot of the kids get put into foster care system or even into the custodial type facilities of juvenile facilities that the county offers. A lot of times those kids are lumped in with kids that have very severe drug problems. They're also lumped in with kind of the worst of the worst. And, you know, if they thought it was bad at home, that's nothing to what they're going to see when they get in with, you know, some of the real bad players.
Wow. No, let's just take the scenario. Like, I'm a teenager. I want to get away from my parents, so I'm gonna call the courts. I'm gonna tell the courts I want to be free. So what is the court going to say? How do they look on this? Where do they start?
Well, the court first of all is going to look to see if the minor chooses to be emancipated. It has to be by mutual consent of both the parent and the minor that is the best interest of the situation.
So the parent can actually say, I don't think this is in the best interest.
Yes, they can make that appeal. The judge can render against them, but at the same time, too, the judge has the option of requiring additional counseling prior to allowing that emancipation. If prior to the judge deeming it that the minor can be emancipated, the court has to, or the minor has to show that he or she is able to support themselves.
What does that mean?
Well, they have to be able to show that they can provide shelter for themselves, that they have a job, maybe a source of income. They also have to be able to show that they can care for themselves and care for their welfare, and that their safety will not be in jeopardy because of their being separated from a parental influence there.
Wow. If they have a job, let's see, we're talking this hypothetically a 16-year-old, hasn't finished school yet. At best, maybe they're able to get through a GED. We're talking minimum wage here. So let's work it through. Minimum wage, that's not going to be enough for them to make it.
Well, I can make it a real clear hypothetical example. If you take, say, $4.25 an hour as an example, minimum wage job, that miner works a 40-hour work week. That comes out to $4.25 times 40 is about $170. That's not their take home. As everybody knows, Uncle Sam gets a big part of that. After that, they've paid their taxes, maybe any local or other state or federal taxes that they're also responsible for, Social Security, those kinds of things. At that point, you add that times 4 weeks, and they're going to average roughly about $680 a month. That will be their income. But if you were to look at basic housing, could be anywhere in the country, single bedroom apartment, maybe $450 a month, maybe $25 for electricity, maybe $225 for food. Right there, just at basic necessities, not including a car payment, not including insurance, not including dates or trips to the movies, time with your friends, you're right there at $700. You're $20 short. So in other words, you're going to have something better than that minimum wage job just to make bare necessities.
And we're talking now, folks, we're talking from the judge's perspective, because the judge does not want to be responsible for releasing this juvenile into the society who cannot take care of himself.
Well, the judge doesn't want to put him into the society and have him become a welfare recipient. This is, you got to stand on your own. This is not standing on your own with the aid and assistance of the federal government or the state government. Wow. You got to be able to stand on your own.
So it's just not going out applying for some type of benefit.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to ask. The teen cannot just say, oh, that's fine, I'll just go apply for welfare. It just doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't work that way. There are some considerations that are given to pregnant teens and things like that, but for the most part, it's a tougher haul for them.
Wow.
And what responsibility then would the parents incur? Let's just hypothetically say that the teen did go out on their own and was granted that emancipation. Now, is the parent released of any financial obligation and responsibility of the teen at
that point? They basically become an adult. They have to fend for themselves. And I think that that's an important thing that I think most teens don't understand. I think they have a lot of protection with their parents, and oftentimes they don't consider that as part of their thought process. They only think of what they want for the moment, and they don't consider the long-term ramifications of what they're doing. And sometimes it's just a matter of, even in counseling sessions that we have with teens, making them fully aware and putting it down in mathematics. I can't lie about math numbers. I cannot create numbers out of thin air and make them, 2 + 2 = 8. It doesn't work. When you put it down in math and say, hey, let's look at your budget before we approve this thing, all of a sudden it's a rude awakening for the kids. And especially your teenager that goes out and gets his first job, and he's expecting $170 and says, hey, I can make this, and he finds out that his check is far less than that by the time Uncle Sam gets a hold of it. He's in for a rude awakening.
So the idea that I can just call up and I can be free and you parents can't stop me, that really is a myth. There's a lot more to this. What about the parents? I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but it does seem like the parents can actually more easily detach themselves from their child than the child can detach themselves from the parent.
Oh, and it happens all the time.
And where parents just call up and say, look, I can't, you're responsible for this child.
And there's a lot of kids that have gone through things like tough love, where they actually just go and change the locks on their house and lock the kid out. Technically, that's not the way that's supposed to be done, because you are responsible to provide a safe environment for your child. Another option that is available there is the parent can basically go to the child and say, hey, look, you have 2 options here. You can live in my house by my rules, or I will take you down to a shelter, and there are plenty of shelters within the county system that are places where the child can be lodged with a protective, caring environment within the shelter, but the parent basically has to sign them in there, saying that you are in charge of my kid now. If the kid's proving that he's not responsible at that facility, then that facility, in combination with what the parents are already seeing, is sufficient grounds for social services to come in and do basically a custodial impound of the child and take him into protective custody.
So actually, it's not the grass is green on the other side, it's just that the grass gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and it's not going to be any better. Go ahead, honey.
Someone once put the grass, it's not grass at all, it's just AstroTurf, and it just looks better than what they think that they have, so.
Let's give our parents, and we've been working hard for 7 weeks trying to help them understand that the issue here in teenagers is that it's not rebellion, it's relationship. And that the way back to our teens' heart and into our own heart is by way of relationship, building a relationship. You know, I love my children, and I'm very thankful for the grace of God and the part that's played in giving us children that did not bring us that heartache and that pain. But not all parents in the audience can say that. Yet there is this realization, I love my child. There's no way I'm just going to put my child in a shelter. I'm just not going to do that. I'd rather have my child free. But then there's the concern, but I don't know where he is tonight. What are some of the agencies, supportive services that parents can turn to that will basically provide a protective shelter, at the same time be working with the child to reunite them with the parent? Because just putting them in a court and putting them in a foster care is not necessarily going to work towards the restoration. But you've got some things on your mind about that.
Well, one of the things I think that really is beneficial for the parents to know that if you've got a child that has gone out of the home and is living with friends, you should really make your best effort to find out who those friends are. A lot of times a good place to start would be your school. Say, who does my daughter hang out with, or who do they spend time with? And oftentimes the schools can tell you, the counselors are very in tune there. Once they've told you that, if you find out that your son or daughter is staying at a friend's house, your best shot right there is to call up that parent and say, hey, look, you are housing my son or daughter. That means you are also incurring all liability for my son or daughter. My son or daughter belongs in our home. As long as you continue to house them, you are going to incur the liability. If my son or daughter gets hurt, you're going to be sued for that. And a lot of times, it is very direct. And a lot of times those parents will quickly escort that kid out of the house.
Here's a cookie, go home.
Exactly. And I think that has a very positive impact, because as long as that kid's got places that he can kind of flop or stay, he's going to continue to stay away. But as long as you limit his or her options, they're going to pretty soon realize, hey, it's either home or the highway, and I don't want the highway. I mean, the kids are going to pick that up pretty quick. The parents at that point, though, have an option of possibly getting them in to a temporary shelter situation, and there's a number of those. Many of them are Christian-based organizations.
Which one do you work with a lot?
One of the ones that we have worked with that is a long-term program is a program called Teen Challenge. It is a Christian-based organization. It's a world-known organization. It's been in existence for about 25 years, and it originally started as a ministry on the streets of New York City, where they were working to actually work with drug-addicted minors, and they were on the streets, and their addiction rate, recovery rate is about 75%.
In terms of drugs, but also in restoring families?
Exactly. It's a completely Christian-based organization. That is a long-term residential program, though, where the kids have to be there from anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
A lot of our parents, they don't work for top executives in major corporations. They don't have the money. They may not have the insurance. How does this work with something like a Teen Challenge? I mean, is it only for the rich?
No, and that's one of the really neat things about Teen Challenge. Teen Challenge does not take any federal money. They do not take any government money of any kind. They're strictly a nonprofit, solely funded by donations. And therefore, they're not under the influence of federal government in a lot of things that make instilling your Christian message with the kids without question. And I think that a lot of times they're able to break ground there by so many people wanting to be involved and seeing, especially if there's a family that has had positive results, they're more apt to give to an organization like that to help keep it going. They also have friends and neighbors of the parents that maybe really love their kid and see their kid is in trouble, can get a community or neighbors together, rally behind them and help them act like a support system, very much like World Vision, and work in that respect.
Wow. Well, a couple of final words. Words of encouragement to the teens. Sometimes, they're discouraged, maybe rightfully so. Absolutely exasperated by an authoritarian parent, exasperated by a permissive parent where there's no boundaries, nothing is sure. Talk to our teenagers. What would you say? How would you encourage them?
Well, you know, I recently saw an article in the paper that indicated that teens nowadays are more afraid of death and injury and harm and all of those things than they are concerned about acne, you know, which is just a huge thing to kids in their teen years. And when you've got children that are dealing with so many of these things, I mean, it is really tough in today's society to grow up with all the pressures being put on you by the media and things like that. But I honestly in my heart believe this, that underneath every kid, even a rebellious kid, is a beating heart that God has designed. And I know that each one of those kids is a flower that is just waiting to blossom. And unfortunately, sometimes some kids need more nourishing, and some kids need more work with the soil, and some kids need more pruning and shearing. But basically, God has a special plan in their heart for all of them. And I think that as long as those kids hang in there and trust the wisdom of God-fearing parents, their result can only be one of a positive nature.
Go ahead, Anna.
Well, I was just going to ask on the other side now, as far as, again, you've worked within the system quite a bit, as far as being an encouragement to the parents of teens, because I'm sure you've probably met some parents, heard some, I mean, they all love their children very much, and so it's very grieving to have a teen that really, when you stop to think of it, again, we talked about it in one of the earlier lessons, you know, 15, 16, 17 years, which is such a short a portion of a person's life, you know, to see them going in a direction that when they took this little baby home from the hospital, this was not what they had anticipated.
No, it's totally devastating. The parents that you run into are just, they're suffering. I mean, our society is just basically set so many things up in favor of the child and just totally hand-tied the parents. And they are just absolutely at wit's end. And when they have a child, especially that is totally rebellious, you can hear the frustration. The parents that call the station are just screaming for help. And unfortunately, the burden is just so overwhelming right now that even there's times that for us alone, just to be able to return a call or to help that parent get in for counseling or even to make a referral, it just sometimes takes days. And those are just extra days that those parents are suffering with a child that is just doesn't have that love for them that they do for them. Wow. And it's just, it is challenging. But the one thing for the parents you need to understand is that the most important thing that you can do for your son or daughter, especially if you have a situation like that, is just pray for them first of all. Get everybody in your group or your organization together and have them diligently pray for the children in your church. And be actively involved in the ministry, to the children's ministry, especially at any local church. If you are actively involved, you'll get a much better feel for what the children are going through and experiencing. And sometimes I think that might help you to be a little more sensitive.
Joining the youth staff or something?
Oh, most definitely. Even simple things like child care and things like that at your church on Sunday. You just gain such a world of information about current trends and things like that from working with kids at Sunday school that may be even able to help you in better dealing with your son or daughter. The other thing too is parents, just don't give up hope. Just continue to keep those prayers rolling, and especially a verse that comes to mind is 2 Corinthians 5:17. If you continue to, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And that Christ can really change those things over for you.
Amen. Ed, thank you so much. You have been very gracious with your time. You have straightened out so many things. We have been blessed, and again, I hope many of our parents will take the heed, and our teens will understand the complexity, the legal complexity that just saying goodbye, Mom, that's just not going to happen. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Take care.
This concludes Part 1 of Session 8. Coming up next, join Gary and Anne-Marie as they continue with Reaching the Heart of Your Teen, with some of the practical issues facing teens today: hair, clothing, dating.
We're going to continue on with the balance of our session, and so I want to have you turn to Roman numeral 3 on your outlines as we really turn the corner and sort of get back on that continuum, back someplace here in the middle where we can talk about issues like dating And that's really where we're going to pick up right now. I want to talk to you about this. Let me just define it. Dating, as we understand it here in our day and in our society, is a Western civilization phenomena that allows our children to have a premature access to a serious relationship reserved for courting. One more time. Dating here in our Western civilization is a phenomena that allows our children to have premature access to a serious relationship that is reserved for courting. Probably most of you dated. I think you dated a little and I dated a little. But as we became parents, and as we began to study the Word of God more and more, Anne-Marie helped our children understand and to realize that there is no need for a premature relationship, because that is only reserved for the time when you really can get married. And we can stand up here before you, teens, here's our challenge. Our children never dated by choice. Not because we imposed this on them, not because we insisted you're not going to date. They never dated. They felt that, what is dating? You get serious with someone for 2 weeks and you get in a fight and get upset and everyone ends up enemies, and it's not worth it. And because even if you did like someone, so what could you do at 16, at 17? And so it was their choice not to date. Not to date in the sense that they weren't going to go out boy-girl relationship. Their desire was, no, the time will come. The time will come when we will know, when God brings a man into our life, so we had 2 daughters, a man into our life, that we will start the process of getting to know each other. Not so much in dating, but just maybe through the church, through group activities. But the process itself will be reserved for when we are mature enough and old enough that if the Lord brought someone in to our life that the potential for marriage was there, then that would be an appropriate thing. And even then, they didn't date. And I also want you to know, for you young gentlemen in the audience, I have 2 son-in-laws. Smart guys, these guys. To capture my daughters, very smart. And dads, you can be sharing this with your sons. They came to me at every turn of their developing relationship with my daughters. At every turn. When they went from just being friends and to Mr. Ezzo, they came in. Mr. Ezzo, one at a time, of course, because they both weren't dating at the same time. But I remember my son-in-law Robert came to me and said, Mr. Ezzo, I just wanted you to know that Amy and I have become very, very good friends. In fact, we're probably a little bit more than just good friends. And I'm coming to you and make sure if you have any questions about my life or what I'm involved in, I just want to make myself available to you. And now I thought at that point, wow, honesty right up front. And then he came back a little later, and several months later, and he shared where their relationship had advanced to. And then he came back a 3rd time, again, and shared where their relationship had advanced to. Almost a pre-engagement. But then he came back again at the engagement stage. You know, I want you teens to realize, as a father, even as a mother, I had absolute confidence in that relationship, because the man who was to be my daughter's husband took the time to include us in the process. And, young ladies in the audience, my children, my girls would never have gone out with a man that would not include their parents in the process. For if they will not include my parents now, you certainly won't include my parents after we were married. Therefore, they said, no, hon.
We'll probably just share maybe a few little guidelines that we had in our own family, and that doesn't mean that this is what you have to do, but really just to give it some serious consideration. And again, we realize that we're talking with families with teens at different ages. Some Some you're just at the point where your teen is saying when. And our first advice to you as parents would say, please don't set a date. Don't set an age particularly. Don't say, well, when you're 16, because they may forget a lot of other things that you've told them, but they will not forget that. But what you can say is, maybe when you're 16, we'll revisit that. But that's going to prevent you from locking into a situation that you might find out that, maybe when your son and daughter is 15 years of age and there might be a special event at the school that they would like to go to. If you've been hard and fast and you become a legalist, you don't take the context into consideration. You say, well, you're not 16, which could be very frustrating because it could be a young man or a young gal that would be fine for this activity for them to go together. We did in our home when our girls were approaching those teen years, and obviously the conversation's going to come up and you just can't say, well, we're not even going to talk about it. You need to talk about it because you need to be planning ahead. But one rule that we had was that the young man would need to ask Gary for the first time before he took either of the girls out. And of course, they both lamented. Amy, I can remember, she's, I will never get married, she said, and she's going on and on. No boy will ever ask. But they did. And they discovered too that it became a real safeguard for them also, because if there was a situation that arose and they knew that maybe some young man was going to ask them out, they could say, well, you've got to talk to my dad first. And so that weeded out some of the guys. And it also gave them an opportunity to get home quickly and talk to Dad and say, listen, so-and-so may be calling, and I really don't want to go out with him. And so it's, for the daughters, it's a real safety net, a door of escape for them. I think another thing, too, we want you as parents, because we realize that many of you obviously grew up more teens during a very interesting time in our society, and so that there may be some things in your own past that you kind of regret have happened, and not to set up things or come across your children out of fear because, oh, this is how it was with me, that is necessarily going to be the same with your own teens. Have a little bit of confidence in maybe some of the parenting that you've been doing. So that's just a couple of little things.
If you have an older child, maybe even a college student, there's one thing we learned from really the St. Clair family who helped us write our blended family curriculum for growing kids God's way. But they have a precious little daughter, Andrea, who I spoke of earlier to you. And, well, Andrea's seeing this young man. And so Andrea's dad wrote up a contract for the young man. His name was Scott. And it was a contract. It's fun, it's funny, at the same time it's serious. I want to read a few of these things here because it communicates all of the points. Number one, he says, because it's a 14-point contract and no fine print, it's all pretty bold. You must treat Andrea in a queenly manner to which she has become accustomed to in our home. So that's one. I think some of you gals would like that. Number two, you must allow Mr. St. Clair to win all athletic contests, no matter how one-sided or trivial. Okay, then that's important. It's for the father-in-law, potential father-in-law ego. Number three, you must not be alone in someone's house. Very serious. Okay, you agree with that? Number four, you should not spend extended time alone in a parked car. Obvious reasons for that, but that's part of the contract. Number five, you should pay for all the meals. Number six, you should open all doors and be buying flowers on a regular basis. Not for Mr. St. Clair. Seven, you must be protecting the purity of the relationship at all times. 8, you must not put yourself in a compromised situation or test your ability to resist temptation. Okay. 9, this is the 9th point of the contract. If you're going to date my daughter, here's the deal. 9, you should offer to drive at all times unless there's an issue of being too tired to drive. Makes sense. 10, no drive-in movies. Besides, you can't hear anything anyway. 11, you must clear all unusual events with the Unusual Events Committee for approval. See Mr. St. Clair for the Unusual Events Committee. He's the chairman. 12, you must be working on number 7. Number 7 is you must be protecting the purity of the relationship at all times. 13, you must be working on your relationship, listen, with God more than you're working on your relationship with Andrea. 14, you should be working on ways to please Mr. St. Clair. Oh, Mrs. St. Clair, thank you. Mrs. St. Clair, to ensure favored person status. This is real important in the parenthesis. For Mr. St. Clair, refer to number 2, and that is just to let him win the games once in a while, always. Something like this dating contract, it's a lot of fun, but it does bring the point home. Both of them signed it here. But you could always refer to it. And you know what it is? It's a great way to indirectly to just remind where this relationship is going. This is, again, for the older ones.
And just, you know, obviously there are several issues that were involved here with purity, not putting yourself in a compromising situation. And invariably, you will hear from your teen, don't you trust me? You know, or between that and after all, you raised me, what are you worried about? And we heard those remarks, and the issue came down to, it's not an issue of not trusting you, but in this particular area of your life, your emotions have never been challenged before. And so that is an issue where you have not, at this point, matured enough to even know how you are going to handle emotions. And this goes for both boys and girls. So during those earlier years, before they do graduate from high school, be working on those issues of what are your standards and why are these your standards? And what is it that you desire in a mate, so that you get the teen is really thinking through the issues for themselves so that it becomes theirs. And also be praying. As parents, I'm sure you're praying for your future daughter-in-law or future son-in-laws, but for you as teenagers also, we would encourage you to be praying for your mate. I know in our own family, when our daughter Amy really started seriously praying, she was about 12 years of age, and we lived in New Hampshire at the time.
She's seriously praying about
a mate. Thank you for clarifying.
Well, actually, not about a mate, about her mate, the one that
whoever God had for her. And it was in that time period when she first began serious prayer for whoever the Lord was preparing for her that Robert came to the Lord. And of course, and we lived 3,000 miles away. When she was 12, we had no idea we were going to be living in Southern California. So you don't ever know how God is already taking care of things, and I would just encourage you in that area.
And for you who have, we had the dating contract for those with the older ones. Now you who still have young ones at home, or maybe you have a daughter, 14, 15 years old. We're going to talk about daughters first in dating. You have a daughter, 14, 15 years old, 13 years old. A colleague of ours has shared in writing something very beautiful that we want to encourage you moms and dads to do with the ones that you have at home. We're going to talk about the daughters first, and I'm going to talk about the families with sons. Read through this issue and listen carefully, please.
I hope I can read through this whole thing. But anyway, it's entitled, How a Father Used a Special Occasion to Strengthen and Deepen His Relationship with His Daughter. On the occasion of her 13th birthday, a father planned a special date for his daughter. His purpose was to encourage her to commit herself to a life of purity during these all-important teen years. After plans were made, the special day finally arrived. Early that morning, her mother gave her a present of a gold key with instructions to give this key as a gift to her father after he had given her his gift to her. The mother also needed to reassure her daughter that she would, at that moment, understand why she was to give away her birthday present. That evening, the father arrived to pick up his daughter in a borrowed chauffeur-driven Mercedes. His daughter was nervous but excited about her first date with Dad. Dad had planned and saved for months for this special date. The ride to the restaurant was filled with light, enjoyable conversation as Dad and daughter recounted many of the fun events of the past. After dinner, the father asked his daughter if he could share his heart with her. He began by reminding her that the Lord called her to a life of holiness. Be holy, for I am holy, which is his very best for her life, and as her father, he too wanted God's best for her life. He then went on to explain to her that she would be facing many new challenges in the years to come, one of which would be dating. The father further explained that the Lord gave him the joy and responsibility of watching over and protecting her, especially during these teen years. To accomplish this goal, the father explained to her how he hoped to be actively involved in the process of relational maturity. After she understood what was involved, the father asked her to make a commitment to the Lord that she would allow her dad to watch over her and protect her during these teen years. At that moment, the father pulled out his gift and gave it to her. As she opened the gift, she found a beautiful gold heart on a gold chain. I thought I'd get further than this before. As the father placed the chain about her neck, he explained to her that the gold heart represented her purity of life. At that moment, she gave her dad the gift of the key and understood that in giving it to her dad, she was saying, "Yes, Dad, I want you to have the key to my heart, to protect it and to keep it." And then the father had an inexpressible joy to say to her, "Sorry, I will guard the key to your heart and all that it represents until that day, your wedding day, when I will give it to your husband." And that's what we would like for you.
That's right. How many of you, you don't have to raise your hands, but for all of you joining us, how many of you adult women wish you had a daddy like that? Not that your dad wasn't great, maybe it was wonderful, but you know, that sense of protection, that inner desire to have that, your little girls need that too. And gentlemen, that's what's needed. How about for boys, though? Surely it's not one way. Their purity is important. Their commitment to the woman who God was going to send into their life. The gift of that purity is as important to her as it is to him coming from her. If you're a single parent, you're probably sitting here thinking, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. If you're a single parent, you're going to give your son a ring. It's going to be at a dinner like this, maybe. Well, you know what that ring represents? That ring represents that for this season, you are the man in my life. And although I am yet older and still wiser, you are the man that's participating in protecting me too. And what this ring is temporary. It's your pledge to me. It's your pledge saying that you will protect me, giving me the right to protect you. Giving me the right to speak to you. Because of our relationship, there should be no other woman. Until the day of your wedding. On that day, you will take the ring off. And in the ceremony, you will give me back the ring. And in that moment, I will realize you are putting on another eternal band with the woman that God has decided for you. That will be the day that you would have fulfilled your commitment. It's a special way of doing it. In fact, you can do that even as a mom and a dad. As a mom in a regular family where we have a mom and dad in the home. This issue of giving the ring to the son. And although there is a man in the house, that ring still symbolizes the commitment that there is no other woman in your life until the woman that God brings. And we can stand before you with great confidence and also great parental pride that you understand, young teens, this issue of purity, and understand, parents, how important it is for you to direct their lives. Amy and Jenny, their standard was to be so pure, so dedicated to the one yet to come, they would not even kiss a boy until they were sure it was going to be their husband. That's the standard. That's the standard you teens strive for. That's the standard that's so far above what is popular in the society. Regardless where you are, that's the standard. That's the standard.
And it isn't a standard so much because, I mean, Jenny did this sort of thing, but God calls us to be pure and to have self-control over our emotions and all of those aspects of our lives. And I think probably for those of you with sons too, it is very important that they understand that the importance of keeping a pure heart and pure thoughts. Not being a male, but obviously having a husband and dealing with lots of people that do have sons, that's a big temptation. And so as parents, we want to be very careful of what our sons and daughters, but even our sons are exposed to.
One more qualifier, hon. When we say our kids really didn't date, it was their choice. That doesn't mean that they didn't go to the senior banquet with a boy. That doesn't mean they didn't go to the 9th grade banquet with a boy and, you know, all well chaperoned and pretty and corsage on them. And we're talking about the characterization of behavior in the motive of the heart in this aspect of pursuing some type of relationship that is prematurely there, to get into a relationship prematurely before that's really reserved for marriage. And so that's what we're trying to communicate to you. You know, another topic, we're going to move on now to number 4, hair, clothing, music, and peers. Boy, do we get these questions from parents of teens, and do we get these from teens. Hair, clothing, music, and peers. First of all, you have to understand, you have to look at your unique situation, where you're at as parents and where you are with a relationship with your teen. The question you have to ask yourself is this a major issue or a minor issue? I mean, if your child is flirting with drugs and maybe flirting with the law and the police are knocking on your door, I wouldn't worry about the way his hair's cut. You got bigger problems. So let's make sure that if this is, and very well maybe this is your battle. Maybe it's hair and you're way down here someplace on this continuum where things aren't so bad, or it's dress, or it's that music they listen to. How could they listen to that music? If that's the issue, okay, let's talk about those things. Let's talk about them. First thing we have to understand, the question we have to challenge parents, listen, we know, we've been through it, so we can empathize with you. But you have to honestly ask yourself, is this a cultural issue or is this a biblical issue? Is it a cultural issue or is this a biblical issue? That's first. Many times we make cultural issues biblical issues, and they're not a biblical issue. But for purposes of definition and trying to understand the importance of family identity, let's just take some of these issues. Let's take hair. If dad has long hair and he wants his sons to have long hair, it's fine. No problem. You know why? Because that's your family identity. Long hair is not an issue of right and wrong unless the long hair is worn in protest to the parent. It isn't what you do often as much as the motive of your heart. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? We've all experienced the trends. Trends tend to be age-graded. That is, there's a trend for young children, there's a trend for teenagers, there's trends even for parents. We all have our different trends. And so we many times, these trends are just cultural. I remember years ago, and I guess, Anne-Marie, you said they were just coming out as we talked about this. I mean, years ago, my kids said, Daddy, could you buy us some jellies? Jelly? Jelly. Now, when I grew up, jelly was something you ate. But when my girls were growing up, jelly was something you put on your feet, which I didn't understand at first. Why would you put jelly on your feet? This isn't, Daddy, it's not jelly on your feet. They're called jellies. They're like little slippers with a lot of holes in them. And so I looked at these things and I think, why am I going to pay? This is a Swiss cheese type of a shoe. But apparently that was in. And some of you parents, maybe you're young enough, or, well, you know, you wouldn't be young enough, but some of your kids were young enough. You remember this. What were you going to say?
Well, one thing aside from that, as far as whether it's a family identity or otherwise, the whole issue of, but everybody's doing it. And I guess for the teen's sake, well, and for the parents' sake, that's not going to cut it because, you know, your folks said the same thing to your grandparents. So they tried that line on them, and they're probably still young enough, your parents, that they realize, no, I told my mom our dad that everybody was doing it, and I really knew that everybody wasn't, and so you remember these things. So that doesn't go to your advantage, and again, it's the proverbial thing. It's amazing, as parents, there were things that your parents said, and the same for myself. We said, oh, when I have children, I'm never going to say that to my kids. It's amazing how we find ourselves repeating many of the things that our parents had said, and the answer to, well, everybody's doing it, is probably the same thing that your parents said to you that you're going to give to your teenagers. But there is the whole issue of the family identity that we want to deal with.
Family identity and trends, we have to find a balance in this. The idea that because other kids are getting it, there may be nothing wrong with kids going out and getting the in sneaker or the in shoe, or even sometimes the in haircut. The question is this, that you parents have to ask yourself. First of all, if you pushed your children into trends when they were young, you know, you dressed them really in a very modern, contemporary way, you know, a little 3-year-old and his hair's cut just right, and you know, if you did that, you have given up that ground to come back now to say, oh, I don't like the way you're dressed. Because once you push them, once you authorized it, that you push them into the pathway of trends, well, they're just doing what they've been following, how they've been raised. You want to just do an evaluation. Am I at fault here? And just bring that before the Lord. But the issue of family identity, I want to talk about this because sometimes it's because our family, this is not something that's appropriate for our family. I guess, Anne-Marie, do parents have the right to say to them, that's not us? I mean, what you're doing right now, or that dress, or that music, or that hairstyle, that's not us.
Right, and that's not to say that every single child in your house has to all dress the same or act the same way. And if you'll bear with us, we'll just use our girls as an example. Amy, the firstborn, she was much more traditional in her dress, and you know, so
she wore Republican black.
Well, today is probably not such a, given today's context, but a good color to wear. But at any rate, so she was much more traditional. Jenny was our much more trendy one. She was up on all the styles, and that was Jenny. So we had to realize that this was Jen. She enjoyed life. She still enjoys life and being stylish. And so there was a compromise that we made. We yielded a little bit, and she had to yield a little. So we would ask her when it came to even hairdos. You know, if this is going to require a lot of care, or if it's going to require quite a bit of an expense to maintain, is this really the type of hairdo that you want? Because who's going to pay the bill? And so that's something that helps the teen take ownership, so that they can still have maybe an appropriate hairdo, but there are some other issues that are in there.
Same thing with the hair, and same thing with the dress.
Right.
The question was asked, are you mature enough? Can you demonstrate to us, or have you demonstrated to us the maturity to wear your hair that way? The one thing in terms of the purity is, do not dress in any way that's going to draw attention to yourself and not to the Lord. I mean, that's the basic rule. But the same thing is true with the other one. I mean, we would say to Amy, you're wearing black again. How about getting a little color in your life? So you're trying, in one case, encourage one of your children to maybe become a little more fashionable in that moment. And the other ones, you're trying to just say, here are the parameters, here's the boundaries. When it came to music, there is some music that we didn't care. I mean, since we paid the mortgage, we thought that was it. Since we put the food on the table, we thought we had a few requests in the house. So there was a certain type of music we didn't care for. We would explain to them why we didn't care for that music. If you really would like to listen to that music, and it's not going to cause anyone else to fall around you, if you're in your own car and you want to listen to that, then that's between you and the Lord. I'm not going to police that. I could only give you principles, but I'm not going to police your behavior at this age. I'm just asking, out of respect for Mom, out of respect for myself, that we don't play that in the house. There wasn't a lot of music that we fell into that category. Maybe in your family there would be. But once again, it's a mutual give and take. It's not simply, you can't ever listen to it. We're just saying, in the home, we would prefer this. It's our taste, our style, whatever it is. You want to listen to it in the car or on your Walkman as you're riding your bike? I'm not going to tell you no. We felt that was legitimate. And you know, because there was no serious or complete prohibition, our teens tended to fall more in line with the appreciation of our style of music because we did not force them into it, but gave them the freedom to gradually, in one sense, surrender their taste with dignity, make that choice by themselves, and they did. What else?
Just a little bit more on the issue of music, especially for those of you because that do have younger ones in the home, and so you've got some years for input, is what kind of music do you listen to in your home? We had a situation one time that Jenny was visiting a friend, and her girlfriend was off in another room, and the mother was saying to Jenny, oh, I wish my daughter didn't listen to this rock music. And Jenny's standing there, and she's realizing that the mom's got the radio on in the kitchen, and she was listening to rock music. And so the very thing that she was criticizing her daughter of is what she was doing. So we do need to be careful of the example that we're setting. And if you start at a young age cultivating a certain taste in music, that will develop and influence your kids as they get older also.
Exactly. I just want to, go ahead.
I was just going to move on to just peers real quickly, unless you had.
Peers, no.
1 Corinthians 15:33 still stands for teenagers as well as little ones. Bad company corrupts good morals. And so you do need to look at the peers that your teens are spending time with. What is their character like? What values do they hold to? When they're over, are they willing to talk to you as adults? Those are all good questions to ask. Do they have a desire, even to spend some time with you as a family? Are they kind to your teens' siblings, to the other children in the house? And again, depending on where you are in the continuum, those are legitimate questions to challenge the teen with. Your friends, this particular friend doesn't respect us. They aren't kind to your brother and sister when they're over. So you get them to help them to see, the conflicts that are there.
Okay. And just to wrap up on this, please don't say, when your teen's doing something that's so different than your family identity, don't say, well, that's just the way teens are today. Because that has nothing to do with it. We're not talking about the way teens are today out there. We're talking about your family and your family identity. And what you want to strive for is a unified family identity that's not so tight that you, in a sense, that you force a teenage conformity, and force a child to become something he's not. On the other hand, you do want to set boundaries in the parameters so that you allow them freedom, but there's limitations with freedom. Your family identity is important, and I think too for your teens to understand that you're in a family. To try to look so different than your family is a statement. But that's the statement of your heart that you have to deal with before the Lord. That's a statement against your parents. Do you really want to make that statement against your parents? Everything we do, we have to think about our family, my brothers, my sisters, my mother, and my father. And I think it's legitimate for we who are grandparents standing up here, sitting up here, telling you, younger parents, telling you young teenagers, that you want to give consideration to your behavior, to your dress, to your hair, to your music, and just simply ask. It could be a case, I like it all. I like the flashy clothes, I like the music, I like it all. Here's my challenge to you. But do you love your mom and dad more? And sometimes, even though you like it and you may not see anything wrong with it, whether it be music or dress, you do need to check in with mom and dad. Go ahead, cause them the faint. Cause them the faint. Ask them, Mom and Dad, give me your opinion. What do you think about this? Is this too flashy? Should I cut my hair more? Go ahead, they'll faint. So who are you? Go ahead, ask them their counsel, ask them their advice. But truly go to listen. You may be surprised that they may say, it looks great. And then you're going to have the freedom so you won't be fighting in your own heart against your parents wondering, I know they don't like it, I know they don't like it. And parents, leave some room for sensitivity. There are guidelines. There are biblical guidelines, and you're going to read about those, and you're going to understand that the Scripture is filled with how we should dress and how we should talk and how we should deal with peers. Right now, we could probably go on and on and on, but we can't. I want to talk to you just from a summary perspective. Why did we get together for these 8 sessions? We spent all this time together. Surely, as I said from the beginning, we can't undo 14, 15, 16 years of parenting and maybe a weakened relationship in 8 sessions. But you know, you may have a type of relationship where you're in the hole and you're deep in this hole. So what have you done with what you've received so far? For some of you, we've dropped ladders in the hole. We've dropped poles. We've dropped rope in the hole. Have you taken hold? Have you tried to climb out of this with your teens? Teens, have you tried to climb out with your parents? And when we talked to you in the very first lesson, the premise of everything we're bringing to you is not teenagers do not rebel against authority, they rebel against relationship. So the way we want to fix it is through relationship. We talked to you about how to start over, that you need agreement. That the two of you say, I want to have a great relationship with my mom and dad. I just don't think my mom and dad know how to. Well, fine, we're here trying to help them, and we're trying to here to help you teens understand that you play a part in this. We've taught you how to say I love you to one another. The parents, for you, lead by your influence, not by your authority. These are not your little children. These are your teens who are rapidly becoming adults. We talked to you about how to give instructions, how to use the appeal process so you don't exasperate, frustrate your teens. And at the same time, for you teens to take responsibility to exercise the appeal process. We talked to you about how to encourage and how to correct through the discipline charts. And then we dealt with some issues and topics in this session. The reason why we've come together for these weeks is to put a Band-Aid on your problem. We admit it openly. Just put a Band-Aid. We want to invite you teens to invite your parents to go through 18 weeks with us in Growing Kids God's Way. Yeah, I said it, 18 weeks. You teens having your own book. You teens need to help your parents, and parents, you need to help your teens by demonstrating your willingness to say, I'm committed to this. You know, if nothing else, let's say you got nothing out of it. I'll tell you this, Mom and Dad. I'll tell you this, teen. You at least spent 18 weeks together trying to rebuild, trying to make things better. We know we can sit up here because post 18 weeks many times over, we have seen parents and teens just solidify. And all of a sudden, teens, these parents, they wake up to something and all of a sudden they realize, wow, you're not a little child anymore. Then maybe I've been treating you that way. And parents, all of a sudden, your teens wake up to the fact that, Mom and Dad, you know, you actually are rapidly moving beyond my parents. You're now quickly moving to the fact that you're my friends. And I want that type of a relationship where your wisdom and your counsel is desired by me, and I will seek it openly. We'd like to get you into a Growing Kids God's Way class, 18 weeks together. It's really up to you. Everything's up to you. We want all of you to have a great relationship with your teens. We want you teens to show the whole world how Christianity in your life, in your family, in your home can make a difference. There's a lot of other boys and girls who have deep hidden secrets in their own hearts. They're hurting really worse than you probably. You guys have a beautiful family, then invite them over, because we know from our own experience there's other teens that love to come over to our house because they didn't know love in their setting. And this is a message that you can bring. Honey, some final thoughts.
It's always hard when we're wrapping up, but you know, as parents, well, even as the teens, but particularly parents, think, what other options do you have? Mm-hmm. You're not going to walk away from your child. And actually, if you did, that would really be, unfortunately, a very selfish thing to do, because God has entrusted you with this life. And He intended for you to raise this child properly, and hopefully that child will come back to Him. But He has left us His Word. He has left us all the truth and all that we need to be able to accomplish the task. It's just sad that somewhere along the way, we haven't thought that the Word of God was sufficient in this particular area of our life. And so I guess maybe that might be my challenge to you as parents is, you know, maybe the class was hopefully a good jumping off point. But go back to the Word. The answers are there. Not every little jot and tittle, but the principles are there. And we do have a very, very gracious God And don't forget that. You know, be praying. He'll give you the wisdom. And as you humble yourself in those areas that are necessary, then God will lift you up. And He will restore. He promises that. But He won't do it if you just sit there and turn your back on the whole situation.
The title of this series was Reaching the Heart of Your Teen. In order to get there, we have to reach the heart of the parent. Your hearts. Your hearts and your minds have to be changed to be able to help direct and even in some cases change the heart and minds of your teens. We want you to have that beautiful relationship. We want your fear replaced with absolute confidence of relationship. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen.